In this video, we examine how a contract can be formed by spoken word, an oral contract. We'll determine what the definition of an oral contract is, the distinctions between oral contracts and written contracts, issues to consider in oral contracts, and we'll revisit the statute of frauds. You might want to take a moment to ask yourself, what does the statute of frauds do in relation to contracts? When you think about a contract, what comes to mind? If you're like most people, you think about something in writing. Maybe you filled in a form and signed it and realized that you were engaging in a contract. You might even think a contract has to be in writing. Many people do. An old saying goes, an oral contract is as good as the paper that it's written on. In reality, oral contracts are every bit as enforceable as written contracts. So what is an oral contract? Very simply, it's a spoken word contract. So if oral contracts are enforceable, why is there such an emphasis on written contracts over oral contracts? Well, part of it is proof. It's easier to prove a written contract than an oral contract. A fact finder is going to look to the writing and the terms are written out. It's much easier to figure out what's going on. In an oral contract, there's a lot more ambiguity. So how would you prove an oral contract? One way might be through admissions by the other party. If one party essentially admits to the oral contract, you have a contract. You might also consider witnesses. Witnesses who can say what was said in the formation of the oral contract. You might also look to notes or other writings that indicate the thoughts or intents of the party. You might look to actions. For example, X gives Y a car. Y gives X $1,000. Let's say there's a problem, the car doesn't work. Y says there's been a breach of contract, an oral contract. The actions of each party here do indicate, and probably would to a fact finder, that a contract has been made. A couple of last issues that play big roles in any case, but particularly in oral contract cases: credibility. Credibility of the parties can be key. Everything turns on being able to demonstrate, as with any contract, the intent. And again, just to review, a court is going to want to look to the intent in an oral contract case by looking at, for instance, witness testimony, written notes, and judging the credibility of the parties. One more problem to consider with oral contracts is the statute of limitations in many states in the U.S. is shorter for oral contracts. If you have an oral contract and it's breached, you'll have to act more quickly to bring a cause of action in that case. Finally, let's consider the statute of frauds. Let's think about what you have already learned about the statute of frauds. What is required? Certain contracts must be in writing. If they are oral, they will not be enforced. Some examples of this: a contract guaranteeing another's debt must be in writing. A contract that cannot be performed in 1 year or less. The most notable example may be the contract transferring an interest in land. And the UCC gives us contracts for sales of goods that are worth $500 or more. Those contracts typically must be in writing due to the statute of limitations. So we've looked at oral contracts, we've established what it is, we've considered differences between oral contracts and written contracts. We talked about some of the issues unique to oral contracts and reviewed the impact of the statute of frauds.